Sorry, I'm not moving very well. I managed to throw my back out while traveling here yesterday. They apparently don't build markers the way they used to. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Adam, Mike's younger brother. Mike was my closest sibling. No offense to you, Jody, or to Jeff, but we were the closest in age, and you and Jeff were enough older than me that you guys already had your own lives that you were leading. But how much do I love my brother? One of my biggest fears in life is public speaking. But despite that, I volunteered to do this. That's how much I love my brother. I struggled with what I wanted to say today. How do you boil a life down to 5 minutes? How do you boil a relationship down to 5 minutes? You don't. I thought, do I tell some funny anecdotes about growing up with Mike? I could talk about the time that he and Jeff locked me outside of the house in my underwear for their own amusement. They thought it was hysterical. Or I could tell you about the time that Mike and his friend Randy Wedge were on our front porch working on Mike's motorcycle, and Mike asked me to put my finger in the spark plug wire, and then he kicked the bike over. You only fall for that once. Again, they thought that was hysterical.
Still do.
Or maybe I should be a bit more serious and tell a story that shows what a kind and generous heart Mike had. Like the time that he dropped whatever he had going on in his life, borrowed a van from his employer, Last Image Screen Printing. You probably don't know this, Jim, but not only did he borrow that van, he drove it 1,100 miles round trip to retrieve me and my worldly belongings from Memphis, Tennessee after a relationship I was in failed. Not only did he do that, but once I got to Indianapolis, I had no place to go. So I lived with Mike and a very pregnant Alicia in Nolan at that time, until I was able to get back on my feet. Never once did Mike complain about having to come get me, having to put me up, or judge me for the situation that I was in at that time. I could tell you those stories that I just told you, but I'd rather tell you about something more recent. Tell you something about the Mike that we all knew. Tell you something that shows the character and strength that he displayed during his 2-year battle with cancer. A year ago, Mike's health took a turn for the worse. A year ago, Mike's health took a turn for the worse. His cancer had spread, and it was starting to look like, barring a miracle, that this was a fight that he wasn't going to win. At this point, I knew that I wanted to take a trip with Mike, not necessarily to say goodbye, but to be able to just spend some quality time with just the two of us. It was January at the time, so we both knew that we wanted to go somewhere warm. Despite what Carolyn says, Mike wasn't much of a beach guy, and there aren't a lot of beaches that are accommodating to either wheelchairs or crutches, so we decided on the desert. We decided to take a trip to Palm Springs, California, a place that neither one of us had ever been to. The most memorable part of that trip was not the beauty of Joshua Tree National Park or the amazing art museum and botanical gardens in Palm Springs that we went to, or even our road trip to the fascinating hellscape that is Bombay Beach on the Salton Sea. The most memorable thing that I took away from that trip were some glimpses that I got into the heart and the mind of my brother. Mike told me he was exhausted and depressed. He told me that he knew that his cancer was going to kill him. And he told me that if it was just him, he'd be ready to give up. But because of his family and how much he loved them, he didn't want to give up. He wanted to squeeze in as much time with them as was humanly possible. He told me his children were the greatest thing that he had ever done in his life, and I would have to agree. Nolan, Alec, Savannah, Ethan, you've all grown up to be extraordinary human beings. Your parents obviously did a lot of good things, a lot of right things. and I am proud to say that I am your uncle. While we were on this trip, Mike had a sketchbook / journal that he carried with him. I don't know if he carried it with him all the time, but he did on this trip. One particular morning, Mike was showering, getting ready for whatever it was we had planned for that day. At this point, Mike's getting ready was a lot more of an ordeal than it was pre-cancer. So while I was waiting for Mike to get ready, I started thumbing through this sketchbook. It was just full of pages and pages of sketches and plans for furniture that Mike wanted to build. I was astounded by the optimism that showed. That with everything that Mike was going through, the chemotherapy, the surgeries, the sickness, and the suffering, that when it came to his work, which was his passion, it was just business as usual. And I was going to tell Phil Mast, who's not here, that if he feels like he has any proprietary rights to those sketches, I did take screenshots. We can talk about that later. Also, while I was looking through this book, I found something that Mike had written some months earlier, something that shows not only that same optimism, but also the humor that he showed in facing his sickness. And this is what he wrote. I discovered one of the benefits of only having one leg today. Driving along I-95 this afternoon, heading to New Smyrna Dunes Park in our rental Honda Ridgeline, when my phone slipped down between the console and the seat. I could see the phone, but couldn't reach it from above. I moved my seat all the way back and was able to crawl into the footwell and reach under the seat to retrieve the phone. Never could have done that with both legs. No, Mike, he couldn't have. But that's how matter of fact he was about the hand that he was dealt. I don't know where that strength came from. Maybe it came from our sister Jody, who also lost a leg and suffered many other horrible injuries in a motorcycle crash 8 years before Mike's cancer diagnosis. I don't know what it is with my siblings and amputations, but I'd like to keep the membership at 2. So I wrote this next part before I knew that there was going to be a musical performance. But this is what I wrote. This is the point where if this was a TV funeral, I feel like somebody would sing a song or play an instrument or read a poem. I can't sing and I can't play an instrument, so poetry is what it's going to be. About 6 months ago, I started running. I hate to run, but I'm hooked. When I run, I like to think about anything other than the fact that I'm running, and my mind goes to weird places. On the day that Mike passed, got a call